Hello and welcome to Q's Retro Perspective. Ever since I got my Switch, I've been fascinated by the fact that Nintendo was able to make a portable console that was about as powerful as a Wii U.
The Nintendo Switch was the first truly hybrid game console. If it's in the dock, it's a home console. If it's in your hands, it's a handheld console. And to top it all, you can play tabletop mode. Some people were a little upset that the Switch didn't have download play like previous handhelds. The 3DS and DS had download play, and all the Game Boys had a primitive version of it with their link cable. But the thing about the Switch is, it's a hybrid. It's got tabletop. It would be redundant. What's easier, downloading a section of the game to another person's console and only being able to play less than half of the game? Or pass a Joy-Con or Pro Controller over to your friend so you have access to the full game?
But what about the first hybrid console on the market?
Well, that would be the Turbo Express. This was a portable version of the TurboGrafx 16, but it only played the card-based games. Although, like anything before the Nintendo Switch, it would be hard to classify this as a hybrid console, as it couldn't connect to the TV in any way. Although, it did have a TV tuner accessory released, allowing you to have a portable color television in your pocket. That already has a one-up on the Switch. Back in 1990, having all the major channels, or at least all the public ones, would be awesome. All we have on Switch is stuff like Crunchyroll and YouTube. Oh, and Hulu. I don't know why there's Hulu but no Disney Plus. Like, come on. Other than that, it had some basic features. A color backlit screen, which was better than the Game Boy, but this caused it to have a 3-hour battery life. The Game Boy had about 10 to 15 hours of continuous play. If you game a normal amount, that lasts even longer. I don't play my Game Boy every day, but assuming I play a few times a week, my batteries can last me weeks or longer. Like the Game Boy, the Turbo Express had a link cable for multiplayer.
So overall, it was a handheld that didn't sell all too well for a home console that didn't sell all too well, with one of its main features being a color backlit screen, and for $100 extra, you could watch Sesame Street on a 2.5-inch screen.
But if the Turbo Express was a handheld that played console games, what about a console that could play handheld games? Released in 1994, the Super Game Boy allowed you to play Game Boy games on your TV. Because Game Boy games have a lower resolution than games on a console that can do this, there is a border around your game.
I put a lot of research into that.
You have some fun borders to choose from, the standout ones being one based off the Game Boy, and one where you just draw your own border. And you can also choose to just have thick black borders around your game, which is fine when watching classic TV shows, but those bars are on the side so it's not too distracting or desolate feeling. So I'm glad Nintendo had the idea to create fun borders that ultimately aren't distracting. The Super Game Boy also adds color to your Game Boy games.
Adds color to your Game Boy games.
Obviously, it's impossible to ask that they add full color to these games. It takes forever to colorize photos, let alone a video game on the spot. Although if you don't want Mario to look like a new species of Oompa Loompa, you can just turn the palette to black and white. You can even use the Game Boy camera, so the SNES had a camera before the Wii U.
Now this definitely got us closer, but it was still just an accessory to play handheld games on your TV. But then came
the Sega Nomad. Now, most people consider the Nintendo Switch to be the first true hybrid game console, but this console
almost became the first.
The Sega Nomad was released in 1995 and was a portable system that played Sega Genesis games. It was rather bulky. But if you compare a Sega Genesis cartridge to a Game Boy's, yeah, it's obvious why. You could even connect a Genesis controller for 2-player games. Now, how would you play 2-player games on such a tiny screen? Well, the magical audio-visual cable, of course, but the thing holding it back from being a truly hybrid console was that the cable was sold separately. If it was included, it could have been considered a hybrid console.
We were so close.
And sadly, we wouldn't see anything close to it for years. But the next thing up is another Super Game Boy. Oh, it plays Game Boy games and Game Boy games! The Game Boy Player was released for the GameCube in 2003. It now also plays Game Boy Color games and Game Boy Advance games, but now needs a startup disc.
And that's the only major complaint I see.
But that complaint has never felt warranted to me. Like, that's just how disc-based consoles work. The Super Game Boy essentially worked like an adapter from Game Boy cartridge pins to Super Nintendo pins. But for a disc-based console, you would need a startup disc. Now, this was sure a really cool product, but it still wasn't a hybrid console. It was just a peripheral. But 2 generations later, Nintendo released...
Nope. You can't make me! I've been advised to suck it up. It isn't a bad console, it's just the fact that nobody bought it, so it was therefore undersupported, and have also been advised to tread lightly as it is many people's favorite console, and saying anything bad could get me shot.
Well, joke's on them, I've already been shot before. Yeah, this console wasn't the best. Let me finish! The Wii U could stream a game to the gamepad, so you didn't need to use the TV, but with the short range, you couldn't really leave the room, as well as the fact that the gamepad didn't always hold a charge too well. It had a good battery life, but forget to plug it in, and no video games for you.
But then Nintendo pulled a Sega and gave up halfway through the generation.
But instead of going third-party, Nintendo released a new console.
They just don't care!
I mean, if you, as a large company, have had multiple failures in the past, and your new console bombed, most executives' first thought wouldn't be, let's make another one. But Nintendo is Nintendo, and that console ended up outselling the Wii. The Nintendo Switch was the first truly hybrid console, meaning Nintendo didn't have to sell you on an SNES and a Game Boy, or a Wii and a DS. They just had to sell you on the Nintendo Switch. If we want to get technical, the Nintendo handheld for this generation could be considered the Switch Lite, but that's really just for people that only like to play handheld.
But there's one more device to talk about.
PlayStation has only made 2 handhelds in their life, and people thought they were going to make another one. And then they made the PlayStation Portal. Now this looks like an extra thin Steam Deck. Hey, maybe you could even download the PS5 games you own onto it.
No, it's just a Wii U.
Yes, after watching the Wii U tank and be belittled for its weird controller and half-thought-out concept, PlayStation essentially made the PSU. It is a handheld game streaming device, meaning you start the game on your PS5 and then stream it to the handheld through...
the interwebs.
And its price is $200. You're going to pay 2/5 of the price of your console to essentially make it a Wii U. I'm gonna go out on a limb and say this isn't gonna sell well.
And that is the history of hybrid gaming.
I think that hybrid and home console gaming will continue to coexist, and honestly, I'm split on if I want another hybrid Nintendo console. Because hybrid gaming is ultimately more convenient having both your handheld and console games as one, but a home console allows for more power.
But I'll inevitably buy whatever Nintendo tells me to.